Hey, this is Reverend Sean over at the Center Path, and my chair just broke, so I had to redo everything, so we're continuing on here. Today we're doing something a little bit off the beaten path, I guess you would say, because our general path is our cheat sheet that we have on the centerpath.org, and for that we're going to be doing different sections every little video series. They should be in order, they're on the playlist. You can look those up, so make sure and subscribe if you want to get more of those. But let's get into something a little different today. One of the questions I get when people come to me inquiring about Buddhism and inquiring about meditation is they don't want to be stuck in some kind of organized religion. Now, this is a funny kind of term because I'm not sure what a disorganized religion is. And if it's disorganized, generally it doesn't become kind of anything. The idea of religion, now Buddhism can be approached, in my opinion, in three different ways. You can approach it as a philosophy, and we'll go over that completely on how to and why one would do that. You can approach it as a spiritual practice, as like an individual spirituality, or you can approach it as religion, because it is religion. And I'll explain why it is, why it's not, and why it really doesn't matter. I mean, you can do whatever you want. So stick with me. We're going to go over the basics of religion. I'll define everything, and we'll go over it from there. So one of the first things we have to do is we have to really define what a religion is. And a religion is kind of a sticky subject, and a lot of people have different interpretations of what they are, and we need to kind of come to an agreement as to what a religion really is. So I went and I found three really good definitions. The first one's from the Oxford Dictionary, and it says, the belief and worship of a supernatural or superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. Ideas about the relationship between science and religion. So does Buddhism fit within that? Not really, because we're not really having a superhuman controlling power, although in some places where you go to temples and you go to other places of worship for Buddhism, you would seem to see it that way, because they do see and speak of the Buddha as being all-powerful in some ways, or all-knowing, or omniscient, or something like that. Okay, you see that a lot. He'll use it like Buddha vision, or Buddha hearing, or Buddha knowledge, or something like that, which is always superhuman, almost to the point of supernatural. Although, and there's some parts in there we see that the Buddha was could travel very quick distances and things like that. Now, those are metaphorical. If you see it from a spiritual or a philosophical point, we'll go into that later. But let's go to the second definition, which is from Cambridge: the belief and worship of a god or gods, or any such system of belief and worship. System of gods or gods, god or a god or gods. You do see that same kind of idea, at least the same verbiage, and the reason you see the same kind of wording is because a lot of the earliest Buddhist texts were translated into English from either Portuguese or German or what have you, whoever showed up first, and the translation gets lost. Now remember, many of the people who did the translations were also missionaries, and they became interested in Buddhism because it seemed to fit with and seemed to be an interesting phenomenon to them, being mostly Christian. So this is kind of like, you see this kind of like same information, especially in some of the Mahayana systems. You see the devas and demigods, and they'll talk about gods and demigods all the time because they were considered a part of the normal pantheon of things that occur in life. And so this is something that also we see in Buddhism. Buddhism has spoken of gods and of goddesses and things like that because it's just part of what people believe. And it was trying to explain a different way of being during a time when there was gods for everything. Okay? And then kind of the Hindu and Brahmin religions, there was many different deities and gods that people would aspire to and worship and things like that. So the Buddha actually did talk about them, and in the Buddhist texts we do hear about them. So we hear about Mara and some other guys like that. So the third one, though, is I thought the most inclusive of everything, and this is from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Now you can look it up on Wikipedia, but I mean Wikipedia is kind of like a mishmash of things, and it was a pretty good one. That was really kind of the first one anyway, the belief in the worship of superhuman controlling power. So this one here, religion, human beings' relation to that which they regard as holy, sacred, absolute, spiritual, divine or worthy of special reverence. This works. It also commonly regarded as a consisting of the way people deal with ultimate concerns about their lives and their fate after death. In many traditions, this relation and these concerns are expressed in terms of one relationship or attitude towards gods or spirits. In more humanistic or naturalistic forms of religion, they are expressed in terms of one relationship or attitudes towards the broader human community or the natural world. In many religions, texts are deemed to have scriptural status, and people are esteemed to be invested in the spiritual or moral authority. Believers and worshippers participate in and are often enjoined to perform devotional or contemplative practices such as prayer, meditation, or particular rituals. Worship, moral conduct, right belief, funny that they put right belief in here, and participation in religious institutions are among the constituent elements of the religious life. Now that's from Encyclopedia Britannica, and that really does kind of hold it all together. That's a much deeper and broader definition of religion, and that's the one I kind of use for myself. Now, religion also, people complain because they don't like the bureaucracy and the politicking in religion. But this is going to happen no matter what kind of group you have. I've seen this in religious groups. I've seen it in Buddhist groups, actually. You see these kind of like, interplay of power and try to get favors from whoever the master is or something like that. And that's a common thing. Now, people also do revere the persona of the leader of the group. And they'll start with this here, but since there's no actual persona of this is an example, right? In some groups they consider this idolatry, but in many they also consider the leader of the community, as it were, which is a person, male or female, to be of some kind of higher stature or some higher level or some kind of master, where people start to forego their own power for that person, or to that person, actually. And that's where we have problems, because then it becomes a personality cult. And that's one of the things, that's one of the reasons I've actually changed and am changing the logo from the sitting Buddha inside the circle to the footsteps, because we're walking on the path. We're walking on the path together, which is kind of one of the things that we like. Now, if we're looking here at the statues of the Buddha, and we use those as part of our reverence, that makes it a religion, right? Now, you don't have to have any of those kind of things. I try to get people, discourage them from being so upset about religions, because many people are recovering Catholics or recovering Christians or Jews or Muslims or whatever they have. They're always from some other, usually an Abrahamic religion, where they've been disenfranchised and discouraged because they've seen things or heard things or noticed things that just didn't make sense and didn't connect. And in Buddhism, because the locus of control is from way out there to here, then we have way more say in how things go as we cultivate our minds, okay, as we cultivate our personality. And remember, as we become, if ground is too hard, nothing good grows. So we have to till that soil and loosen up and get rid of some of the rocks and some of the things that are useless. And we also have to start beginning to understand when we're growing good thoughts or good things or good plants, for that matter. We have to also understand what's the difference between a weed and a good plant. Okay, and we have to be able to go to the root of those and pull them out by the roots, or see them as the roots, or nurture them from the root. And this is the process of practice in Buddhism. This is the process of self-development, which Buddhism is all about self-individual development. And it's very difficult because you can get sidetracked into things like minute changes in definitions, and you can get sidetracked in things like small processes. Now remember, there's four main types of Buddhism. The Vajrayana, the Mahayana, Theravada, and Zen really is what we would really kind of see those, because you can see them as very distinct from each other. And on the surface, they're very, very separate. But as you get deeper and deeper and deeper in them, it's all going to be the same information. Right? It's going to be all about the releasing of suffering and loving kindness and wisdom and compassion and those kind of things, and generosity and these. And those are worthy of development. This is one of the things we hear people say. This is a noble thing, worthy of development. So this is how people come in to at least my center, and they come in to speak about Buddhism, to ask about Buddhism, and they want to see something different. They want to be something, they're looking for something exotic perhaps, maybe something novel, because they've seen too many times sitting and kneeling and standing and preaching and these kind of things, but how else are you going to get that information across? Now, generally remember, most religions in all of time, most people are illiterate, especially in the past. You go 200 years and before that, which is not very long at all. Most people couldn't read. There was writings, but most people couldn't write. So they would have to go to somebody else to achieve and get the information. And this is why we had the masters, and this is why we have those who know and can read and stuff like that. And you'd have the scriptures and go from one place and hear the same thing in another place because it was written down. And this was almost magical at the time, because you could go from one city and see one guy and he would tell you one thing, and then you go to another city miles and miles away. It took you days to get there, and you could hear the same sermon, exactly the same. That's because they were reading it, right? That makes sense. Now, the same kind of thing in Buddhism too. We have repetition of chants exactly how they are, and that helps to unify and also make sure that McDonaldization, I guess you would say, because McDonald's, you go, always the fries are always the same, and the shakes are always the same, and the hamburgers are always the same, and that's what we do want to see. But
okay, so not really like McDonald's. McDonald's is just an idea, okay? We're talking about having things being similar every place you go. Now, that's very useful if you're teaching mass groups of people trying to get a lot of information to a lot of different people. You want to have consistency, right? That makes sense. However, if we're even looking at this as a spiritual practice, that's going to all be individual, right? And even a philosophical process is probably going to be somewhere between the religious. Everything is going to be the same. Everything is going to be consistent, word for word kind of idea. And even, so when you go to a temple or you go to a church or you go to these places, you know what to do. You know where to kneel. You know where to bow. You know where to place offerings. The process of doing that without becoming either embarrassed or looking weird or whatever it is. In the spiritual sense, it's going to be all very unique. And I'll talk about that in a totally different kind of video where we'll discuss the spiritual aspects of your own Buddhist practice, which becomes more, that's the more Zen-ish kind of area that I practice. It is very individual. There's a lot of self-teaching, or not self-teaching, because you do go to teachers, and I want you to go to your teacher, and I want you to find good teachers and do a lot of reading and a lot of research, and that's a philosophical part too, so kind of mix it all together. But anyway, let's go back to this video and figure out the rest.
in Buddhism, especially here in the West, we see that we've fragmented it, and we've taken bits and pieces of different techniques and different traditions, and they've slowly welded together. Especially in the West, where we've started to see people doing religion all over again. They're trying to bring things that were from Asia, that were very specific to the region. Perhaps because of the climate or the weather or the seasons, and you try to bring them back here, and it just doesn't quite work out well. So when you're in practice as a Buddhist practitioner, you're on this path, the thing is to see those things and to not judge them and not to freak out by them and not to get upset by them, because that's a very, very vital and important part of this process, this cultivation of your mind, this traveling on that path, because you want to learn to appreciate why chanting is done, why the prostrations, the bowing. There's different bowings for different kinds of traditions, by the way. Some will lay down all the way on the floor. Some just kneel. Some just do 3 bows. Some do 1 bow. Some half bows. These kind of different things. If you learn them and you get yourself into them and really soak yourself in that stuff, the practice does become more rich. Now, you may let go of some of those things because they're impractical for you, or they don't work for you, or something like that, but they're important. So when the teacher, the place that you're going to, that you're learning Buddhism from, is saying, hey, let's do some chanting, or let's do some mantra, or let's do some prostrations, or something like that, something very formal and very, very like process-wise. Okay, you're doing some kind of religious procedure. Go ahead and do it and get into it. You don't have to like totally. You're basically you're sipping the Kool-Aid. You don't have to chug it. You can get in there and you can learn about these things, and you can also pick and choose and use what you want to use in your own practice. Now, it's better, I think, if you learn in the practice, you learn those processes. Now, they're very specific, and some of them take a very long time to learn. Actually, doing prostrations correctly is a very persnickety thing in many temples. You go there and you have to follow exactly how they do it. Otherwise, it's, okay, you're not real. Now, this is also a vetting process for those who are actual real parishioners or real community members and not real community members. At one time, it was being able to read. If you could read for example, the Torah. In the Jewish tradition, if you could read the Torah, the way it's read, because many of the letters in there are unpronounceable or pronounced a very specific way. And if you didn't learn that, you could not be part of the community. You weren't part of the community. That's the one way they could vet and tell. Other ways, too, are like, what do you do when you go to the church? If you went to a Catholic church and you didn't know to kneel and use the holy water and do the cross and this kind of thing, well, they could see, like, this person is not from here, so maybe they need some training, or maybe they're, why are they here? And this is kind of a typical vetting process that we have, and we've seen through time. It's very important. Now, you can't do it, it's very easy to just say, oh yeah, I'm part of the group. Nobody carries a card. It's not like there's an ID. You don't have to put your thumb on something and nothing reads your thumbnail or thumbprint and tells you where you're at. So it's the process of religion is bringing the community together, and it's important. So I don't think it needs to be completely let go of. I don't think you should, as a practitioner, as someone who's practicing this kind of stuff and starting to look into contemplation and look into meditation and look into using this to change your life, use the religious part of it and understand it. It's really good for contemplation, and it's really good to understand. It's really good to understand other people's processes of their contemplation and their religious piousness. Where does that come from? How does that happen? And notice the attachments and notice the aversions to those things and how it may hinder or help you, and use that for your own liberation, because that's what Buddhism is really about. The Buddha was a person, right? And he was just a poor little rich kid who kind of flipped out at one point and took off and said, I got to figure this out. And he did. Okay. Now, as it went on, people started adding more and more embellishments to some of the stories. Of course, this makes sense. And they said, well, he could do this and do that, and there's magical things here and there. We don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. We need to see that as the learning process, as the process was understanding the way it was explained. Okay. So anyway, this is Reverend Sean over at the Center Path, and I hope you guys are doing really well. I hope this kind of helps at least open some questions in your mind, and get you to think about Buddhism as a religion for you. Now, we'll go over another one later, which will be Buddhism as spiritual practice or Buddhism as a philosophical practice. So don't forget to subscribe. Leave us a thumbs up and a comment, so we can know what you're up to. And then don't forget to go to the website, the www.thecenterpath.org. Download that cheat sheet so you can follow along, and you can kind of come up with your own way of understanding this. Now, remember, this is all basic Buddhism. This is a very, very introductory, so you can have at least better questions as we go. Okay, so this is Reverend Sean of the Center Path. You guys have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon. I hope you're well, and be happy.